Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightfall Terrors. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep, so before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settle in, and begin. I've been a ranger at Stillwater National Forest for over 11 years. Many folks imagine it's all scenic views and friendly campers. They haven't patrolled the northern quadrant in winter, led a search in dense fog where you can't see more than a few feet ahead, or discovered what's left of a hiker who misjudged the terrain. My name is Mike Calloway, and I managed close to 60,000 acres of rugged wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. Most of it is untouched forest, towering cedar and fir trees that have stood for centuries. It's stunning during the day, but after dark, it becomes something very different. My base station sits on the edge of what locals call Black Ridge Valley, a deep stretch between two mountain ranges where the forest becomes unusually thick. Once you're about a mile in, cell service disappears completely. Radios only work on and off. Rangers have a saying, the valley swallows signals. Truth is, it swallows more than that sometimes. I was logging incident reports when Supervisor Jameson called in. 3 hikers were now 2 days overdue from their weekend trip. Their car was still at the trailhead, and there was no indication they'd returned. Standard procedure, he said, but he wanted me on it. The last known coordinates placed them in my northwest sector, the most remote, least forgiving part of the park. Even skilled hikers can lose their way there. Strange sounds echo at night. Definitely not bear, not wolf, not anything I can identify. Weather's shifting, I said, glancing out my window at the darkening sky. If they're still out, they'll need shelter. That's why I'm calling you, Calloway. You know that terrain better than anyone. I packed up quickly. Emergency gear, first aid, extra clothes, GPS, satellite phone, flares. The temperature was dropping fast. If they were lost or hurt, they didn't have long. As I loaded my truck, I noticed odd tracks near the woodpile. Too large for deer, not quite right for bear. The stride was unusually long. I'd seen similar prints before, always after heavy rain, always near the edge of Black Ridge. I snapped photos and moved on. Time was tight. The drive to Overlook Trailhead took 40 minutes over a road rough enough to rattle my teeth. I saw only one other ranger, Wilson, leaving his shift. He waved me down, looking more pale than usual. You heading up to Overlook for the search? He asked. I nodded. I was there yesterday. Heard something odd near Stillwater Creek. Wood breaking, but in a pattern, too regular to be natural. He hesitated. Found a deer carcass maybe a quarter-mile off trail. Wasn't eaten, just broken, like something grabbed and twisted it. Bears, I suggested, though we both knew bears don't kill and leave. Hid behind. Wilson glanced at the tree line. Just watch yourself, Calloway. Something's off. I'd known Wilson for years. He wasn't the type to scare easily. At the trailhead, I found the hiker's Subaru, blue, lightly frosted, and covered in pine needles. Their permit showed plans for a 3-day loop through Granite Pass and back along Stillwater Creek. Experienced hikers could have managed it in 2. Something had clearly gone wrong. I checked in with base and started on foot. The forest swallowed me quickly. The canopy let through only dim light, The usual pine and damp earth smells were there, but beneath it all lingered something else, musky, animal-like, similar to what you smell at a zoo. The trail rose steadily for about 2 miles until I reached a ridge overlooking the valley, my first lookout point. I scanned for smoke or signal lights through binoculars and noticed branches snapped along a distant ridge. These weren't clean breaks from wind or storms. They looked smashed, like something big had pushed through without care for noise or trail. As night fell, I couldn't shake the sense that whatever was out there wasn't something I could match to any known wildlife. I camped at a ranger emergency shelter nearby, a small wooden shack with a cot and radio. Not comfortable, but better than a tent in falling snow. After securing the place, I hiked out with my spotlight, calling out occasionally. The forest remained unnaturally still. No animal sounds, just the wind and my footsteps. Park ranger, anyone out there? My voice didn't carry far. It was absorbed into the dark. That's when I spotted the first sign, a bright blue bandana snagged on a thorn bush about 10 feet off the trail. Beyond it, the underbrush was trampled as if someone had run through it, not the careful steps of hikers. It looked more like a desperate escape. I followed the trail of damage. It zigzagged sharply, weaving between trees. Whoever made it had been running and changing direction, clearly trying to get away from something. About 50 yards in, I found a backpack by a fallen log. Its contents, energy bars, water, first aid, were partially spilled. The ID said it belonged to Brian Wilkerson, one of our missing hikers. The log nearby had deep gouges in the bark, about 9 inches apart, too wide and deep for a bear. Whatever did this had significant strength. I took photos and bagged the backpack. Then I heard it, wood cracking in the darkness. Not a branch snapping underfoot, but something larger, deliberate. I froze. Another crack, then another. Methodical, rhythmic, heavier than any human steps. This is Ranger Calloway, I called out, hand on my sidearm. Identify yourself. Silence. Then a low, deep sound. Not a growl, but something that resonated in my chest. I'd never heard anything like it in over a decade out here. I swept my light across the trees. Nothing. But I could sense it. Something just outside my range of vision, aware of how to avoid it. I backed up slowly, making no sudden movements. The cracking branches moved with me, keeping pace, never closing the distance. Back at the shelter, I locked the door and radioed in. This is Calloway at Overlook Shelter. I found belongings from one of the hikers and signs of distress, requesting additional search support at first light. Copy, Calloway. Forecast shows heavy snow overnight. Reinforcements may be delayed. Understood. I'll continue at first light. I left out the strange sounds and the tracks. Nothing official explains what I experienced. Nothing I could put in a report. I barely slept. Every creak jolted me awake. Around 2 a.m., something heavy stepped onto the roof. Not raccoons or squirrels. This was heavier. The structure groaned under its weight. I stayed still, hand on my weapon. A musky animal odor filled the shelter. It lingered for about 20 minutes, shifting position overhead. I tried to control my breathing, pretending to sleep. Eventually it moved off. In the morning, I found 18-inch prints outside, spaced about 7 feet apart. Whatever it was had circled the shelter, stopping at each window. I photographed the prints, noticing dark, coarse hairs stuck in one, much longer and thicker than bear fur. The radio crackled. Calloway. This is base. Storms moved in quicker than expected. Mountain passes are closing. Search team is grounded for now. I stared at the prints. They led towards Stillwater Creek, exactly where the hikers had been heading. Copy that, base. Continuing search solo. Negative, Calloway. Wait for backup. I thought about those hikers. Maybe hurt, maybe being hunted. Delay could cost them. Conditions aren't too bad here. I'll make one sweep along their intended path. We'll return if it worsens. A pause. Understood. Maintain hourly radio contact. I packed and stepped into the snow. Both the hiker's trail and the unknown tracks led the same way, deeper into the valley. As I moved downhill, the snow thickened, muffling everything. Visibility dropped to 30 yards. The tracks disappeared under fresh snowfall, but the broken brush still marked a trail. About 3 miles in, I found a campsite beside the creek. The tent was half collapsed, its poles bent unnaturally. A pot was overturned near a soaked fire pit. It had clearly been abandoned in a hurry. A second backpack hung from a tree branch, a common bear safety practice. It belonged to Michelle Cohen, another of the missing. No sign of the third pack, but scuff marks and drag lines in the mud near the creek suggested a struggle. Something heavy had been dragged across the bank. I called out again. Only the creek answered. Crossing it, I found what had been dragged. Not a person, but a deer carcass torn apart with force. Its spine snapped, limbs wrenched, not bitten. No signs of feeding. This wasn't for food. 20 yards further, I spotted a hiking boot tangled in roots. A stained sock remained inside. Likely blood. The disturbance around it suggested someone, probably the third hiker, had fled in panic. Snow was coming down harder. I knew I should turn back, but if they were still alive, they were running out of time. I pushed deeper into the trees, where the canopy blocked most of the snowfall. Even midday, it was dim. I needed my flashlight. Tree trunks showed those same deep scratches, parallel, high up. Some recent, some old. Whatever had made them had been here a long time. I found a crude shelter under a fallen tree. Signs suggested someone had taken cover here. A granola wrapper confirmed it was one of the hikers. Then I heard a voice, faint but human. Help! Somebody help us! I moved fast but cautiously. The sound came from a ravine ahead. From a rise, I saw them. 2 people in outdoor gear beneath a rock outcrop. One was slumped. The other looked up. Park Ranger, I called down. Stay put, I'm coming to you. They looked up, expressions changing from fear to relief. Be careful, the woman warned. It's still out there. I approached, carefully. Brian Wilkerson had a bad leg injury, deep gash from knee to ankle. What happened? I asked, treating the wound. It took Jason, Michelle whispered. We were camping when it came. Huge, moving through the trees. We didn't get a good look. Just a shadow. Brian winced as I cleaned the wound. It tore the tent apart. Jason ran one way. We ran the other. We heard him scream. Then nothing. What about your leg? I asked. Crossed the creek downstream. Something grabbed me underwater. Felt like a hand. steel fingers. Michelle hit it with a branch. It let go. Michelle added, "It's been coming back, circling us, breaking branches, making this low humming sound like it comes through the ground." That matched what I'd heard. We had to move. There's an emergency shelter 3 miles back. We'll head there and call for evac. Michelle grabbed their gear. What about Jason? I hesitated. Given what I'd seen, hope was slim. But I said, "We'll send a full team once you're safe." Brian leaned on me as we moved. Snow had eased, but daylight was slipping. We had to reach the shelter before dark. We'd made it about half a mile when we heard that now familiar crack of breaking wood, close, far too close. We froze, listening. Another snap followed, then another, moving parallel to our position, just out of sight beyond the trees. "It's stalking us," Michelle whispered. I drew my sidearm. "Keep moving, slowly. Stay together." As we resumed our cautious advance, the breaking sounds persisted, always maintaining a careful distance, never revealing the source. It wasn't random. There was purpose behind it, a pattern suggesting intelligence, not animal instinct. Snow began to fall heavily again as dusk crept in. We were moving too slowly. We wouldn't make it to the emergency shelter before nightfall. "There's a rocky outcrop ahead," I said. "Defensible position. Clear lines of sight. We'll hold out there until morning." As we turned toward the outcrop, the sounds ceased. A heavy silence settled over the woods for several minutes. Then, a new sound cut through the quiet. This time not from behind, but directly ahead. It hit me with chilling clarity. It wasn't just tracking us. It was hurting us. The sounds weren't random. They'd redirected us, steering us away from the shelter, deeper into its territory. "Change of plans," I whispered. "We're doubling back toward the creek." Michelle's eyes widened. "That's what it expects. We're supposed to run away from the noise." "Exactly. So we do the opposite." I shifted more of Brian's weight onto my shoulder. "When I give the signal, move fast and stay quiet. No matter what you hear, don't look back." They nodded, pale in the fading light. We pivoted and moved, angling slightly upstream from where we'd been before. The forest was silent until a sound echoed through the trees. One I'll never forget. It wasn't wood snapping this time, but a deep, low vocalization vibrating through the ground. A growl, a roar, both and neither. The noise carried rage and confusion. Our change in direction had disrupted its plan. "It's coming," Michelle gasped, glancing back. "Eyes forward," I ordered. "Keep moving." Heavy footfalls crashed through the underbrush behind us. Whatever it was had given up stealth. It was coming at us directly, with frightening speed for something so massive. We reached a steep embankment above the creek. Water thundered below, swollen by snowmelt. "We have to cross," I said, helping Brian down the slope. "The shelter's about 2 miles on the far side." Michelle looked uncertainly at the rushing current. "It's too deep. There's a fallen tree about 200 yards downstream. It's our best shot." We moved along the ridge. I glanced back and saw it. Something dark and massive moving fluidly between the trees. Too quick for its size. It slipped out of view before I could get a good look. Then we saw the log bridge, a fallen old-growth tree spanning the narrowest part of the creek. "I'll go first," I said, holstering my weapon. Then I'll help Brian. I stepped onto the log and tested its stability. The bark was slick, but the trunk was solid. I crossed, then turned to assist the others. Michelle guided Brian to the edge. I reached out as he stepped onto the log. Then, a thunderous crash erupted behind them. Through the snow, a figure appeared at the tree line. Even hunched, it was nearly 8 feet tall, broad-shouldered, long-limbed. Its silhouette was human-like but disturbingly off. I couldn't make out its features, only eyes faintly glowing in the dim light. "Move now," I shouted, drawing my weapon while still gripping Brian's arm. Michelle pushed from behind as I pulled. Brian crossed the log with adrenaline-fueled strength. Michelle followed without hesitation. The creature roared again, deep and resonant, then did something that removed all doubt of its intelligence. It moved downstream toward a narrower section of the creek, clearly planning to cross. It was trying to cut us off. We dropped all pretense of stealth, moving as fast as Brian's injury would allow toward the trail that led to the shelter. The snow was now falling in sheets, limiting visibility to just a few yards. Our only advantage was that the creature was equally blinded. We'd covered perhaps half a mile when we heard the breaking of branches, this time from ahead. It had crossed the creek and gotten in front of us. I made a snap decision. "This way," I said, turning us off the trail toward higher ground. "There's a rock formation, narrow entrance, easy to defend." We spotted it through the snow, a mass of huge boulders pressed together by some ancient force. Between two of the largest was a narrow passage that led into a small, sheltered chamber. "Get inside," I said, helping Brian squeeze through to the back. Once we were all in, I positioned myself at the entrance, weapon ready. The space was tight but secure. Nothing large could force its way in quickly. Night had fallen completely. My flashlight lit the snow swirling just outside. Beyond that, total darkness. For nearly an hour we sat in silence, listening. Occasionally we heard snapping branches from various directions, never the same twice. It was probing, testing our defenses. "What is that thing?" Michelle finally whispered. I hesitated. In 11 years as a ranger, I've encountered bears, wolves, mountain lions. Nothing like this. There's old folklore, I continued quietly. Miners called it the Stillwater Watcher. The local tribes had their own name. Rangers don't discuss it officially, but we all know the signs. "You mean Bigfoot?" Brian asked, incredulous. Shook my head. "That name makes it sound like a myth, a joke. There's nothing funny about this." Michelle asked, "You've seen it before?" "Only traces, glimpses, never this close. It usually stays away from rangers." I checked my radio. Still dead. Too much rock around us. Most encounters happen with lone hikers. People who get separated, like Jason. Brian went quiet. A loud crack echoed right outside. We fell still. My flashlight beam lit nothing but snow. Then, a massive hand reached into the light. It wasn't fur-covered. It had dark, tough skin, stretched over thick fingers with curved nails. It moved with deliberate caution, testing the shelter's edge, then pulled back into darkness. Michelle stifled a scream. Brian pressed back against the rock wall. Suddenly, the radio crackled. "Ranger Calloway, do you copy? Search Team Alpha. Here. We're at the emergency shelter. What's your position?" Over. Before I could answer, a roar erupted just outside. The hand reappeared, reaching deeper into the crevice. I fired a warning shot into the snow. It pulled back immediately. Heavy footsteps retreated at a surprising pace. I keyed the mic. Alpha, this is Calloway. I have 2 survivors, 1 injured. We're approximately 1 mile southwest of the shelter, near Granite Formation. Requesting immediate medevac. Copy that, Calloway. Coordinates locked. Teams en route. ETA, 20 minutes. The next 15 minutes were quiet. Whether the creature retreated due to the gunshot or realized help was coming, I didn't know. Then beams of light cut through the night. 4 rangers approached, scanning the woods with powerful spotlights. Calloway, you in there? Came a familiar voice. Here, with 2 survivors. Clear for now. As we stepped out, I glanced toward the tree line. And in that moment, before the lights reached us, I saw it, standing upright at the edge of the forest, watching. In that glimpse, I understood why it stayed hidden, why it hunted by stealth and shadow. Some predators lose their edge when exposed. This one didn't. The search for the 3rd hiker, Jason Mills, continued for 2 weeks before shifting to a recovery operation. His body was never found. The official report listed a mountain lion attack. The tracks I'd photographed were deemed inconclusive. The hair samples vanished during transport. I still patrol the northern quadrant of Stillwater, still watch the edges of Black Ridge Valley, but I never go deep into that territory alone. And when I hear rhythmic cracking at night, I go the other way, because the Stillwater Watcher is still out there. And now, it knows me. My name is Takakota Ravenwolf. In Lakota, Takakota means friend to all. The irony isn't lost on me, especially now, alone in this cabin, miles from another human, listening to something large move through the brush outside, something that's not my friend. I took this job in the Denali Wilderness 6 months ago, leaving a cramped Seattle apartment behind. The posting from the National Park Service seemed to appear out of nowhere. Experienced wilderness guide needed for remote outpost. It offered purpose, solitude, and a connection to the land. My grandmother, who raised me with the stories of our ancestors and their bond with nature, would have understood. The interview process was tough. They needed someone capable of handling the isolation, harsh weather, and emergencies. My background, guiding in the Olympic Mountains, training in field medicine, made me a strong fit. I accepted without hesitation. My outpost overlooks a pristine lake that mirrors snow-capped peaks. The cabin, built in the 1950s and modernized since, has solar panels, a satellite phone, and basic comforts. My duties include tracking wildlife, assisting lost hikers, enforcing regulations, and logging environmental data. Every 2 weeks, a plane delivers supplies and collects my reports. The first few months were peaceful. I established routines and documented local wildlife. Eagles hunted fish with precision. Moose waded the shallows at dawn. Distant wolves howled at dusk. I felt privileged to protect this land. Everything changed with the first snowfall in October. I woke to 6 inches of fresh snow. After making coffee on my wood stove, I strapped on snowshoes and packed for patrol. The forest was quiet, sound absorbed by snow. 3 miles out, I saw the first tracks. At first, I assumed they were from a large bear, though most were hibernating by now. But something was off. The prints were enormous, 18 inches long, 5 distinct toes, too widely spaced for a bear, and the stride was over 4 feet. It had walked upright. I took photos, placing my gloved hand for scale, and followed the trail. It led to a stream, then vanished. No prints on the far bank. It was as if it had entered the water and disappeared. That night, as the wind howled and temperatures dropped to 20 below, I reviewed the photos. The evidence was clear. Something massive walked through my forest. I started a report for headquarters, attaching the photos and measurements, but left out any guesses. Let the experts decide. Just as I was settling in for bed, I heard it. A deep, resonant call that shook the cabin. Not a wolf, not a bear. Something else. It lasted 10 seconds, then faded. I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., heavy footsteps circled the cabin, stopping at each window. I stayed still, shotgun in hand, breath misting in the cold. Just before dawn, I heard a steady thumping coming from the storage shed. When daylight came, I found the shed door torn from its hinges, my emergency food gone. In the damaged wood, I discovered dark, coarse hairs, unlike any I'd seen. I radioed HQ. Probable bear break-in, I said, requesting reinforced storage. Copy that, Ravenwolf, came the scratchy reply. Weather's closing in. Drop delayed 5 days. Can you hold out? Affirmative, I replied, though I wasn't sure. I sealed the hairs in a sample bag. They were finer than bear fur, but thicker than human hair, with a reddish root. Under my microscope, I couldn't identify them. That afternoon, I received an emergency transmission. A group of hikers missed check-in. Last known location 15 miles away, near dangerous terrain. A storm was moving in. This was what I trained for. I packed 3 days' supplies and medical gear, then set out into the storm, unaware I was walking into something much worse than bad weather. As darkness fell, I caught movement in the trees, a massive shadow pacing me. Every time I stopped, it stopped. Every time I called out, silence. I was being watched, tracked, hunted, and whatever was following me through that frozen forest wasn't human. It was calculating, patient, and intelligent. Snow fell in thick sheets as I pushed deeper into the wilderness, my headlamp cutting a narrow path through the darkness. Snowflakes sparkled in the beam before vanishing, ghost-like. I followed the GPS coordinates marking the last known location of a missing hiker. The landscape, buried under snow, was growing more alien by the hour. 4 hours in, I made camp beneath a rocky overhang, setting up my tent within the natural shelter. I melted snow for drinking water and ate a quick meal, jerky and energy bars. The cold worsened, but my specialized gear held off hypothermia. Sleep came in fits. Twice I woke to unsettling sounds, branches snapping under heavy weight and deliberate footsteps crunching through snow. The third time, silence jolted me awake. Total silence. Not even the wind stirred. The usual nighttime forest sounds, owls, rodents, wind, were gone. Something had disrupted the balance. I reached for my rifle slowly. A massive, hunched shadow passed over the tent. I froze. The shape paused, growing larger as it neared. The tent fabric shifted as something pressed against it, not aggressively, but inquisitively. Through the thin wall, I saw the vague outline of a hand, far larger than any human's. Fingers splayed as it moved across the material, feeling it, then pulling away. Heavy footsteps circled my camp twice before fading into the trees. When daylight finally broke, I emerged to find snow around the site disturbed. The tracks matched ones I'd seen earlier, bipedal, but these were fresh and clearly defined. They showed a consistent gait and places where the creature had crouched to inspect the ground. Most troubling were the prints leading straight to my tent, ending in a semicircle where the shadow had stood. Nearby, I found the coarse hair clinging to bark 8 feet off the ground. Something tall had rubbed against it, leaving behind physical traces and what looked like territorial markings. Continuing my search, I hiked along a narrow ravine between steep ridges. The storm had passed, revealing a crisp, clear day. Around noon, I spotted something red, a backpack partially buried in the snow. Inside was Jason Keller's ID, one of the missing hikers. The contents were intact: food, water, maps, no sign of damage or distress. 50 yards away, I discovered another pack, Amber Lynn's. It too appeared carefully placed. As I surveyed the area, a pattern emerged. The hiker's gear, tents, cookware, supplies had been arranged in a loose circle about 200 feet wide. At the center stood a chilling display: 3 pine trees uprooted and planted upside down, roots reaching skyward like skeletal hands. Balanced among the stripped branches were animal skulls, rabbits, foxes, even a young wolf. It felt deliberate, ritualistic, not the work of predators or confused campers. This was a message. I documented everything and radioed headquarters. The signal was weak, but I relayed my location and findings. "Any sign of survivors?" the dispatcher asked. "Negative," I replied. "Equipment present, no personnel." "Evidence suggests," I hesitated, unsure how to explain. "Possible wildlife involvement." "Understood. Rescue team dispatching from Fairbanks. ETA, 18 hours. Can you secure the site?" I glanced again at the inverted trees, the massive prints, the eerie calm. "Affirmative," I said, though not fully convinced. Night approached fast. I couldn't reach my cabin before dark, so I chose a high ridge for camp, elevated ground with good visibility. I built a small, efficient fire and checked in with headquarters hourly. By 11:42 p.m., all communication stopped. My satellite phone lost signal. The emergency radio buzzed only static. I was alone, in a wilderness that now felt hostile. The first rock landed 10 feet away, too large to have fallen naturally. It had been thrown with force. A second came closer. A third smashed my cooking pot. I doused the fire and took cover behind a boulder, rifle ready. For 20 minutes, nothing. Then came the sounds, not stones, but guttural growls. Deep and resonant, they evolved into clicks and whoops, patterns that seemed linguistic. More disturbing, they came from all directions. There wasn't just one creature. A huge figure moved at the edge of my vision. Tall, broad, moving with fluid grace. Another appeared opposite it, boxing me in. I fired a warning shot. Silence. Then a mimic. A perfect vocal imitation of my gunshot echoed back. Not just copied, mocked. They didn't leave, just circled, testing my defenses with noise and sudden movement. I fired only when necessary, conserving ammunition. By dawn, they had vanished, but they left something behind. At the edge of camp, the half-eaten body of Jason Keller. Identification was difficult. I vomited twice. This wasn't a simple kill. Jason had been tortured, limbs dislocated, skin removed in patterned sections, organs extracted with surgical precision. This wasn't predation. This was study. With shaking hands, I covered the remains with rocks. The rescue team would need to document this. I still felt eyes on me. Then I saw it. A face behind a pine trunk, partially hidden. The features were both human and alien. Sloped forehead, deep-set eyes reflecting light like an animal's. Wide nose. We locked eyes. In that moment, I understood the old legends. Sasquatch, Wendigo, the creature that walks like a man, Bigfoot, a name far too small for what I saw. Its expression was calculating. It raised one massive hand in a slow wave. Not a greeting, a statement. This wasn't our first meeting, and it wouldn't be the last. The rescue team arrived just past noon. 4 seasoned rangers, well-equipped. I envied their lack of understanding. Lead Ranger Michaels examined Jason's remains. His face stayed neutral, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, the tightened jaw. 20 years in service, he said. Never seen anything like this. What do you think? I asked. Not bear, not wolf, nothing from the usual list. He stood. This was planned, ritualistic. He studied me. You have a theory? In the daylight, surrounded by armed professionals, my experience sounded unbelievable. Could be human, some survivalist, gone feral. He didn't buy it. We'll call in specialists. For now, we keep searching. We split into teams. Michaels and Jen investigated the original site. Knox, Valdez, and I followed tracks leading northwest. Progress was slow. The tracks appeared, vanished, then reappeared, as if whatever we were tracking wanted us to follow. These prints, Knox said, inspecting one. What do you make of them, Ravenwolf? I dreaded the question. Large, bipedal, bare on hind legs, Valdez offered. No, the stride's too consistent. This thing walks upright naturally. Knox met my eyes. He understood. He'd worked in Alaska long enough to know the stories. By mid-afternoon, we reached a clearing beneath a massive spruce. The snow had been cleared away in a perfect 30-foot circle. At the center, 5 missing hikers sat in a semicircle, backs against the tree, alive but vacant. No visible injuries, just blank stares. Got survivors, Knox radioed. 5 non-ambulatory. Need evac. While Valdez treated them, Knox and I inspected the area. Claw marks gouged the spruce 15 feet high. Small piles of bones marked the compass points. Trees bent inward around the clearing, forming a rough dome. Whoever or whatever did this didn't want them dead, Knox said quietly. Then Michael's voice cut through the radio. Base camp compromised, equipment destroyed, Jen injured, returning. ETA 30 minutes. Maintain security. Knox's face hardened. Defensive positions. Valdez, get them ready to move. As we prepared, the forest fell silent again. The same unnatural stillness I now recognized as a precursor A growl rose from the northern edge. Knox raised his rifle. More growls answered. From the east, then south. They're surrounding us, I whispered. Who is? Valdez asked, her voice cracking. One of the female hikers suddenly spoke. Her voice was flat. They took our eyes and gave them back. They took our voices and gave them back. They took our minds. She looked at me. They kept some. They learn from what they hunt. They become more like us. One day, they'll walk among us, wearing our faces, speaking with our voices. Knox moved to protect the group. How many, Raven Wolf? I scanned the trees. Shadows moved. At least 3, maybe more. Can we make the extraction point? I did the math. 2 hours minimum, 2 exposed. Hold here. The next 20 minutes dragged. The creatures tested us, moving, making sounds, communicating with unnerving intelligence. When one male hiker began convulsing, Valdez rushed to him, briefly leaving her post. That's when it charged. Blur of dark fur and massive limbs crossed the clearing in seconds. Knox fired. The creature stumbled but didn't fall. It vanished into the trees, bleeding. Did you see that? Valdez gasped. Focus on your sector, Knox ordered, his voice shaky. We all saw it. 7 feet tall, reddish-brown fur, ape and human features blended into something unclassifiable. Michaels and Jen arrived soon after. Jen limped, bleeding, his face blank with shock. We need extraction now, Michaels said. Choppers inbound. ETA 45 minutes. That may be too long, I said, explaining what had happened. Michaels listened, nodded. We form a perimeter. No one fires unless absolutely necessary. We circled the survivors, weapons ready. The creatures circled too, throwing objects, mimicking sounds, always just out of view, testing us, planning. We were being studied, and it wasn't over. One of the male hikers suddenly became visibly upset, pointing toward the woods and repeating a single phrase. They're in the trees. They're in the trees. I glanced upward. The fading daylight silhouetted the towering spruce limbs above us, revealing nothing at first. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw them. 3 large figures carefully positioned above. Having climbed the trees while we were focused on threats at ground level, I shouted and raised my rifle. The ambush hit from all sides. The figures above dropped branches and rocks, while others charged us from below. In the chaos that followed, I lost track of everyone's actions. I remember firing until my magazine emptied, then reloading by instinct. I recall the sounds, not just the gunfire and shouted commands, but the creatures themselves. Their vocalizations shifted from strategic to something furious, almost animalistic. Jen was the first to go. He was dragged into the woods before anyone could intervene. His screams lasted for almost a minute before stopping abruptly. Then Valdez was taken. A huge arm reached from behind a tree, grabbed her ankle, and pulled. Knox managed to catch her hand, but couldn't overpower the creature's strength. Through a mix of coordinated retreat and desperate defense, Michaels, Knox, and I managed to protect the remaining hikers until the distant thump of helicopter blades cut through the noise. That sound seemed to disorient the creatures just enough to give us a critical edge. As the helicopter descended into the clearing, its spotlight swept through the darkness, and the creatures pulled back, not in fear, but in a calculated retreat. They They took their injured with them, leaving no bodies behind. The evacuation was frantic. We loaded the surviving hikers first, then Michaels and Knox. As I moved to board, I locked eyes with one of the creatures I'd seen before. It stood at the forest's edge, massive and calm, unaffected by the lights or noise. In its hand, it held Ranger Chen's radio, examining it with clear interest. Then it did something chilling. It raised the radio to what looked like a mouth and pressed the transmit button. Through my own radio came a perfect imitation of Michaels's voice. All clear, safe to return to base. The message wasn't for us. It was practice. As the helicopter lifted off, I watched the creature disappear into the trees, taking with it any doubt I had about what we were dealing with. These were not just unknown animals. They had intelligence, tactics, and the unnerving ability to learn. Back at the regional headquarters, the debrief took hours. Officials from multiple agencies asked the same questions again and again. What we saw, what we heard, they were especially focused on the hiker's condition and the odd clearing where we found them. Do you think these events are linked to other reports from Olympic National Park? One official asked me. I repeated the question aloud, realizing suddenly that our experience might not be unique. The official nodded grimly. 4 incidents in the last 18 months, he said. Rangers and hikers reporting highly intelligent, predatory behavior from unidentified bipedal creatures. Ritual placement of gear and bodies. Survivors found in near catatonic states. A pattern was emerging, and it extended beyond Alaska. Whatever these beings were, they were expanding their territory, sharpening their methods, and identifying our weaknesses. When I returned to my isolated cabin 3 days later, everything was just as I'd left it. But as I unpacked, something small tumbled from my bag. A finely woven bracelet made of plant fibers and small bones. I hadn't packed it. One of them had placed it there. It wasn't a threat or a trophy. It was an invitation. They were studying us closely and wanted me to understand that night, as the wind howled around my cabin and the northern lights rippled overhead, I documented every detail I could recall. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of shadowy forests and silent watchers, creatures adapting to become more like us with each passing day. By morning, fresh tracks circled my cabin in the snow. A complete ring. They hadn't gone anywhere. They wanted me to know our investigation was mutual. They were observing me as carefully as I was observing them. And unlike me, they weren't on a deadline. The aftermath brought unexpected changes to my remote post. Park Service authorities installed extra equipment, motion-triggered cameras, upgraded communication systems, even a small cache of tranquilizers and conventional arms. Scientists from the Biological Survey Unit arrived, collecting samples and setting up monitoring stations throughout my patrol zone. For 2 weeks, my once isolated cabin buzzed with constant activity. I answered repeated questions, marked maps, and led researchers to locations where I'd seen signs of the creatures. But we found nothing. No prints, no fur, no signs. It was as if the forest had erased every trace. Maybe they moved on, said Dr. Rivera, the lead biologist. These creatures seem to avoid human intrusion. We may have forced them to relocate. I didn't argue, but I knew better. They hadn't left. They were watching. They understood that humans had come looking, and they'd made themselves invisible. When the scientists finally packed up and left, and I was alone again. The forest seemed to breathe normally. The familiar sounds returned. Wind through the branches, small animals rustling, distant wolves. But underneath it all was something else, something waiting. 3 nights after the teams left, I woke up to find my breath visible in the freezing air. The wood stove had gone cold, something that never happened when fully stocked before bed. Then I saw the cabin door gently swinging open in the breeze. I always locked that door. My shotgun still sat in its rack, untouched. I grabbed it, checked the chamber by habit, and listened. That's when I heard a faint rhythmic tapping from my desk. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap. Something was deliberately touching the keys on my laptop. I crept into the main room, shotgun ready. There, in the blue light of my computer screen, sat a figure that defied explanation. A large, fur-covered form hunched in my desk chair. Its long fingers moved over the keyboard with unexpected control. It was reading my notes. For several long moments, I stood frozen. The creature's back faced me, an easy target. But something stopped me. Curiosity, maybe, or a deeper instinct, knowing that killing it could trigger a response I couldn't handle. As if sensing me, the creature slowly turned the chair to face me. Its face emerged from the shadows, a wide forehead, deep-set eyes reflecting the screen's glow, and a mouth that was oddly human, despite its prominent jaw. We stared at each other. Its gaze moved to my shotgun, then back to my face. It understood what it saw. Then, slowly, it raised one large hand and gave the same wave-like motion I'd seen in the woods. It was communicating, maybe even acknowledging me. I lowered the shotgun slightly, not fully, but enough to signal I wasn't shooting. The creature nodded, a disturbingly human gesture, then stood up. It was massive, towering over me by at least 2 feet. In one fluid move, it swept my laptop into a rough satchel made from plant fibers and animal skin, taking everything. My logs, my reports, my messages to HQ. It backed toward the door, never breaking eye contact. At the threshold, it paused and pulled something small from its bag. It placed the item gently on my desk before stepping into the darkness. I approached carefully. On the desk was Jen's Park Service badge, stained with dried blood. The message was clear. We've studied you. We've taken one of yours. We know your ranks. We know your symbols. By dawn, I was still awake, having spent the night securing doors and windows. I radioed headquarters to report the break-in and theft, framing it as a data security issue, not an encounter with an unknown creature. I knew the truth wouldn't be believed. Isolation affects judgment after all. Recommend deploying security staff to your location, the dispatcher responded. Team can arrive by afternoon. Negative, I replied, surprising even myself. Situation contained. Additional personnel could escalate risk. Request permission to recover stolen equipment alone. There was a long pause. Request approved with conditions. Daily check-ins required. Extraction team on standby. You have 72 hours to recover the data before a full response is launched. They were giving me a chance to resolve this quietly. I prepared immediately, packed supplies, checked weapons, and studied maps. The creature's tracks in the fresh snow led northeast into rugged, rarely patrolled terrain. By noon, I was on the trail, The tracks remained steady, showing no signs of fatigue or struggle. Now and then, I saw spots where the creature had stopped to watch its back trail, choosing spots with clear visibility. It knew I'd follow. It was leading me. At dusk, I reached a narrow ravine carved into the mountainside. The path twisted for about half a mile before opening into an isolated valley. Turning back now meant losing the trail and the chance to act alone. I chose to continue, using my headlamp sparingly. The wind funneled through the gorge, biting cold. Shadows played tricks on the rocks. The snow-covered path now showed more prints, others joining the lead trail. This wasn't just one creature's path. It was a route used often. The ravine eventually widened into a valley about 2 miles long, a mile across, ringed by steep mountains. Unlike the dense forests, here there were only sparse trees. Little cover. At the center sat a frozen lake, reflecting stars in its dark surface. I cut my light completely and found cover on a rocky outcrop. From there I surveyed the valley with binoculars. What I saw shattered conventional understanding. Across the lake stood shelters, not random piles of debris, but clear, deliberate constructions. Domes made from bent saplings and hides arranged in a semicircle around a central fire. The creatures moved between them, at least a dozen, varying in size but similar in form. They had built a settlement. They were organized. I zoomed in on the central clearing. 3 of the creatures sat near the fire, working together on objects I couldn't identify. One larger figure stood to the side, clearly on watch. It scanned the valley entrance with a soldier's patience. If I moved, it would see me. I stayed hidden, scribbling notes by feel into a waterproof notebook. The temperature dropped fast, but I didn't dare move for warmth. If I were discovered, surrounded, that might be the end. Near midnight, the settlement came alive. The creatures gathered around the fire in a circle. One, older and larger, stepped into the center. Gray fur framed its face and shoulders. It held my laptop. Even at this distance, I saw the blue light of the screen. It operated the device smoothly, pausing to gesture. Others responded with sounds. It was teaching them, explaining our tech, our communication, our structure. The realization struck hard. These beings weren't reacting. They were planning, studying us, understanding how we work. By dawn, activity slowed. Most returned to their shelters. Sentries changed shifts. I began my retreat, moving with care. By mid-morning, I was several miles from the valley. I tried the radio. Base, this is Ravenwolf. Request secure channel. Only static. Battery fine. I switched to emergency frequency. Still nothing. Either terrain was blocking the signal, or something was actively jamming it. I picked up the pace. Stealth no longer mattered. The land slowed me. Steep ridges, thick snow. But I kept going. I had to get back before nightfall closed in again. I heard it. The steady crunch of snow under deliberate, heavy steps. Moving parallel to my own, about 100 yards to my left. I paused, listening carefully. The footsteps stopped too. I was being followed. Changing course quickly, I veered uphill toward the higher ground. The sounds resumed, no longer concealed. I caught glimpses through the trees, not just one figure, but several, moving in coordination. They weren't just following me. They were steering me. It took me too long to realize I was being driven into a box canyon, a natural trap surrounded by steep rock on 3 sides. By the time I recognized it from my mental map, they had already cut off any escape. I was cornered. I found the most defensible spot, a rocky alcove at the back of the canyon, and prepared to stand my ground. I had limited ammunition, no way to contact headquarters, and no real escape. My only chance now was figuring out what these beings wanted. They stepped out of the forest slowly, with deliberate coordination, 7 of them, forming a half circle at the canyon's entrance. The largest moved forward. I immediately recognized it as the same one that had visited my cabin. In its hand was my laptop. The screen was dark, the battery likely drained. It placed the device midway between us, not returning it, but marking the ground as if inviting dialogue. I stayed behind cover, weapon in hand, but not raised. The creature gestured to the laptop, then to me. The message was clear. This is yours. Come get it. It could have been a trap, but if they'd intended to kill me, they had ample opportunity the previous night as I watched them from the ridge. This felt like something else. A test, a negotiation, maybe even communication. I stepped forward slowly, eyes shifting between the figures. None moved. When I reached the laptop, the lead creature extended its other hand, revealing Jen's blood-stained badge. It was offering a trade, my device for their trophy. I hesitated, then set down my weapon and picked up the laptop. The creature watched me closely. Its eyes conveyed something deeper than threat, something thoughtful. When I offered Jen's badge in return, it shook its head in a surprisingly human way. It didn't want the badge. From around its neck, it removed a crude necklace made of twisted plant fibers. Hanging from it was a small stone tablet, about 3 inches square, marked with unfamiliar symbols. The creature pointed to the tablet, then to my chest pocket, where I kept my park ranger ID. An exchange, credentials. I slowly removed my ID and held it out. The creature studied it before taking it, offering the stone tablet in return. Our hands touched briefly, its palm large, calloused, hairy, but unmistakably hand-like. As soon as the exchange was made, the creatures withdrew in unison, retreating in their semicircle formation without turning their backs. They understood tactics and caution. At the canyon's mouth, the lead creature made one final gesture, an extended arm, palm up, fingers spread. Then it turned and vanished into the trees. The rest followed with precision. In the fading light, I studied the stone tablet. Its etched patterns looked deliberate, curves and angles suggesting meaning, not random marks. This was language of some kind. When I returned to the cabin after dark, it was untouched. The radio still worked. I reported the recovery of my laptop, leaving out the details. That night, as snow fell and wind howled, I examined the tablet under my lamp. Patterns began to emerge, repeating elements, possible symbols for concepts or sounds. Had I been given the creature's written language? Was it independently developed or tailored for human understanding? More pressing, what had they learned from my laptop? My notes, reports, emails. How much did they now grasp about human systems? As I drifted into sleep, one thought lingered. They hadn't destroyed or kept the laptop. They'd studied it and returned it. This wasn't predatory behavior. This was communication, diplomacy, first contact. I, Takakota Ravenwolf, park ranger stationed in a remote Alaskan post, had somehow become Earth's unintended liaison to an intelligent species long hidden in legend. The implications were staggering. What happens when a civilization that's watched our worst behaviors from the shadows decides to be seen? I'd find out sooner than expected. The stone tablet became my focus. After finishing my daily ranger duties, I spent every evening under my desk lamp, photographing and tracing its symbols. Over 2 weeks, structure began to reveal itself. Patterns, repetitions. This was a system, not nonsense. I maintained regular radio contact with headquarters, keeping reports strictly professional. Wildlife sightings, weather logs, maintenance updates. My personal journal held the real story. Distant sounds, fleeting movement, efforts to decipher the tablet. Headquarters seemed satisfied, chalking up past incidents to isolation stress. Security systems at the cabin stayed active but reported nothing unusual. Life resumed a surface normalcy, but I felt them watching. On my patrols, I sensed their presence. Never seen, but always there. Occasionally, I found objects left on my path. Shaped stones, arranged twigs, even a pine cone, stripped of scales and a pattern matching symbols on the tablet. These weren't threats, they were messages, attempts to create a shared language. A month after the canyon encounter, headquarters gave me a new assignment. Assist a research team from the University of Alaska, conducting a winter wolf study. I was to support their 2 weeks mission. Are they aware of last month's events? I asked the dispatcher. Negative, came the reply. That information is classified. You're to provide standard ranger support. This concerned me. Civilians were being sent into potential danger unknowingly. I considered refusing or warning them, but either could result in my removal and leave no one to protect them. 3 days later, the float plane landed on the lake. I met the team with the professionalism that masked my concern. Dr. Maxwell Jenkins led the group, along with grad students Leah Winters and Marcus Okapour, and technician Ben Harper. They brought typical wildlife monitoring tools, camera traps, tracking collars, collection kits, and winter gear. We have identified 3 possible den sites, Dr. Jenkins said as we unloaded at the cabin, planning to monitor each in the coming days. I reviewed their map, stomach tightening. 2 sites were within 5 miles of the creature's territory. One was directly next to a path I'd seen them use. This eastern site is dangerous this time of year, I suggested, indicating the closest one. Let's start with the western sites. Dr. Jenkins frowned. Our time is limited, Ranger Ravenwolf. We need to visit all locations. Park Service protocol recommends keeping teams together in remote areas, I said, inventing a rule. We'll get to the eastern site later, he agreed, though reluctantly. I hoped the delay would give me time to assess whether the creatures were aware of these newcomers and how they might respond. For 3 days, everything proceeded normally. We set up cameras, tracked signs of wolves. The team followed safety rules and worked without complaint. On the 4th night, as we reviewed data by the wood stove, the power failed. The backup generator didn't start. Probably ice on the solar panels, I said, lighting kerosene lamps. System should reset by morning. Leah glanced uneasily at the window, where snow blew sideways. I thought I saw something out there earlier, near the tree line. Plenty of wildlife here, I said. Could have been moose or elk. It was walking upright, she said quietly. Before it stepped into the trees, Dr. Jenkins chuckled. Next, you'll say you saw Bigfoot. The joke lingered awkwardly. I adjusted the lamp to avoid reacting, but Marcus watched me carefully. You know, he said slowly, there have been strange reports from this region. Sightings of upright, unidentified creatures. Some even made it into classified Park Service logs. Every forest has its monster tales, Ben said. Some legends reflect real patterns, Marcus replied. Across North America, indigenous cultures speak of similar beings. The Salish say Sasquatch. The Algonquians speak of Wendigo. The Inuit. That's enough, Mr. Okafor, Dr. Jenkins interrupted. We're here for science, not folklore. The conversation shifted back to their work, but tension remained. Later, as they turned in, Marcus lingered. You've seen something, haven't you? He asked once we were alone. This wilderness holds things not yet fully explained by science, I said cautiously. My grandfather was Lakota, Marcus said. He spoke of forest guardians, beings who straddle the boundary between humans and nature, observers, testers. What else did he say? They're not good or bad by our standards, just different, intelligent, adapted to this land. They see us as temporary visitors. Did he mention how to speak to them? Marcus looked surprised. You've tried to communicate with them. It wasn't a question. I didn't treat it as one. I retrieved the tablet from beneath the loose floorboard. Marcus studied it carefully. These symbols resemble pictographs from Anasazi sites, he said. Others are entirely new. Any interpretations? Nothing conclusive, but it feels like a credential, a formal recognition. We talked for hours. Marcus offered anthropological insights I lacked. Together we began identifying recurring elements, forming a tentative framework. By dawn, we'd reached an unsettling idea. These weren't animals with high intelligence. They were a separate civilization, deliberately hidden, observant, and now emerging. They're not just watching anymore, Marcus said. Something's changed. Maybe it's human expansion, resource extraction, tourism. We're pushing into their last safe spaces. So, this is first contact under pressure, I asked. Or the early stages of conflict, he answered. They know us, our tech, tactics, and flaws. Now they're revealing themselves in calculated ways. Before we could continue, the cabin door burst open. Dr. Jenkins entered, clearly alarmed. The satellite phone is gone, he said. Also, the snowmobile's been dismantled. Outside, we found the machine's engine laid out neatly on a tarp. Nothing broken, just methodically disassembled. The phone was missing. Bears don't do this, Jenkins said. Neither do wolves or moose. Vandals, Ben offered weakly. 50 miles from the nearest town, Leah said. Jenkins turned to me. Ranger Ravenwolf, is there something you're not telling us? Before I could answer, a deep, resonant call echoed through the forest. I knew the sound. It was answered by two more surrounding us. Inside. Now, I ordered, drawing my weapon. We secured the cabin. I gave them a simplified explanation. enough for them to understand the seriousness. Reactions varied: skepticism from Jenkins, quiet confirmation from Marcus, fear from Leah and Ben. "We need evacuation," Jenkins said, reaching for the radio. "They've got communication," I replied. "The power, the phone, it's deliberate. They're isolating us." "Why?" Leah asked. "To study us," Marcus said. "Just as we came to study wolves, they're studying us." A heavy thump on the cabin roof stopped the conversation. Something large moved above us, its weight making the wooden beams groan. A second impact came, then a third. Multiple beings were taking up positions around our shelter. "They've never been this aggressive before," I whispered to Marcus. "Something's different," he replied. "Or maybe this was the plan all along, to bring in more subjects for study." The attack began with a calculated approach. First, they blocked the chimney with arranged branches, forcing smoke back into the cabin and reducing visibility. Then they tested each window and door, applying pressure to assess weak spots. Throughout this, they communicated constantly, complex calls that coordinated their movements. There was no random destruction, no rage. Every move had a purpose. "They're not trying to get in yet," I noted, watching their behavior. "They're testing us like scientists running an experiment." Dr. Jenkins, visibly shaken, nodded. "We're the test subjects." This testing phase lasted about 20 minutes before they pulled back. During the brief lull, we took action, barricading windows with furniture, turning tools into makeshift weapons, and preparing a secure fallback point in the cabin center. "If they wanted us dead, they'd have done it by now," Marcus said. "They're after something else," I replied. "Knowledge, or maybe communication." Then came a new sound, a rhythmic tapping on the front door. Not the random banging from earlier, but a deliberate pattern. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 slower ones. Repeated. "It's Morse code," Ben realized. "Short, short, short, long, long. That's S and M. SM," Leah repeated. "What does that mean?" And then it clicked. "Stone marker, the tablet." "They want the tablet," I said. Marcus nodded. "A symbol of communication. They gave it to you as ID. Now they want it shown." "You're not seriously thinking of negotiating," Dr. Jenkins protested. "We already are," I said, retrieving the stone marker. "The only choice is whether we do it by their rules or ours." With the tablet in hand, I approached the door. The others took defensive positions, armed with whatever tools they could use. I knocked in a response, reversing the creature's pattern. 2 slow taps, a pause, then 3 quick. A long silence followed, then 5 rapid taps. "They understand," Marcus whispered. 5 taps, basic signal for acknowledgement. "Or it's just coincidence," Jenkins said, but without confidence. I made the call. "I'm opening the door," before anyone objected. I unlocked and cracked the door about 6 inches. Just enough to see outside, not enough for anything large to come in. A creature stood 7 feet away, the same one that had taken and returned my laptop. It seemed like a leader. Its breath steamed in the cold. In one hand, it held our missing satellite phone. In the other, a wooden carving of a human figure. It was unmistakably Dr. Jenkins. The message was clear. "We've studied you. We know who's in charge. I held up the tablet, slowly extending it through the gap. The creature stepped forward, deliberate, not threatening. When it reached the doorway, it offered the satellite phone in return. Our hands briefly touched, its skin warmer than expected, fingers surprisingly nimble, as it took the tablet. Then, something unexpected happened. It pulled a second tablet from a pouch, identical in shape, but engraved with different symbols. It offered it to me and secured the original. An exchange, Marcus said quietly, like presenting credentials. I accepted the new tablet with a nod. The creature mirrored my gesture, raised one hand in a wave-like motion, and vocalized a new sequence, shorter, more structured, almost word-like. Before I could respond, it turned and disappeared into the trees. The sounds on the roof and around the cabin faded. They were gone. Still, we kept our defenses up through the night, but they didn't return. By morning, I ventured out. The snowmobiles, parts had been reassembled with precision. The engine started on the first try. They're letting us go, Ben observed. No, Marcus said. They're making sure we leave. He pointed to the tree line. Shadows moved in parallel with us, keeping distance, but clearly visible. No more hiding. They wanted us to know we were being watched. I radioed HQ. The extraction team was en route. Security protocols stay in place. No one leaves alone, I told the team. That night, while the others packed up and prepared their notes that would never make official reports, I studied the new tablet under my desk lamp. The symbols were different, more intricate. They formed a pattern. Marcus joined me. These aren't just identification signs, he said. They're sharing information. He pointed to repeating elements. This set shows up 8 times, slightly varied each time. Could be places. And these linked symbols may be relationships. As we examined more, a map began to emerge. Locations across Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. Some showed signs of their presence, others ours. The message became clear. This wasn't just communication. It was a warning, a declaration. We're here. We know about you. We know where you live, and contact is increasing. The extraction helicopter came as planned. As gear was loaded, Dr. Jenkins pulled me aside. My report will only mention wolves, he said. Unofficially. What now? I looked toward the forest. I could still feel their eyes. First contact already happened, I said. What happens next depends on us. Dialogue or conflict. And what do you think they prefer? He asked. They know our history, I replied. They've seen what happens when we face the unknown. The researchers left. What they experienced would never be published, but it had changed them. I stayed, continued my ranger duties, tried to decode the new tablet. 2 weeks later, HQ radioed with news. I was being reassigned to a special interagency task force. The goal: investigate unusual wildlife activity across the Pacific Northwest. They said I was a good fit. What they didn't say, but I knew, was that others had reported similar encounters. The creatures weren't just in Alaska. They were everywhere, emerging at once. Coordinated. I packed up, placing both the tablets carefully in my bag. Whatever came next, science, secrecy, diplomacy, or resistance, these objects represented a turning point. Out there in the woods, something intelligent had been observing us for generations. While we dismissed them as myths, They studied our language, tools, and flaws. Now, they were ready to be seen. My name is Takakota Ravenwolf. I stand between two worlds that have always shared this land, but never understood each other. What lies ahead is uncertain, but one thing is now undeniable. We are not alone in these ancient forests. We never were. I discovered a journal. The final entry, dated 2 days earlier, read, Day 3. Something followed us all day. Max thinks it's a bear, but it moves differently, always staying just out of view. Jod wanted to turn back, but we're making good time despite the rain. Strange sounds after dark, not animal, not human. We'll investigate a structure we spotted from the ridge tomorrow. No buildings should exist in that section of the park. I checked their map and saw a red X marked several miles northwest of their last known camp, deep in a valley that didn't appear on any official charts. Rather than wait, I decided to follow. If the hikers had headed to that structure, they could be hurt or stuck, especially with worsening weather. With near constant daylight, I could travel safely through the night along their likely route. I descended into the valley, dense with vegetation I couldn't identify. Everything looked oversized, more ancient. Ferns like small trees, mushrooms in perfect rings. The forest felt untouched and incredibly old. About 3 miles from their campsite, the trees abruptly gave way to a clearing, perfectly circular, about 50 yards across. In the center stood what I first assumed was a huge tree stump, 8 feet high and just as wide. As I got closer, I realized it was made of stone, weathered blocks forming a crude shelter. No windows, just a single entrance. Despite its apparent age, recent footprints, 3 distinct sets, led inside. Hello, Max, Jode, Carrara, Ranger Service, I called out. My voice felt oddly muffled, as if the air swallowed sound. The silence afterward felt too complete. I moved closer, flashlight in hand. The air grew colder with every step. I should have waited for backup, but if they were injured, I couldn't risk the delay. The entrance was smaller than it looked. I had to crouch to get inside. Inside was a single chamber, empty, except for a stone altar in the center. No hikers, no gear. I scanned the ceiling. Symbols covered every inch. Spirals, handprints, and a recurring figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, with long arms. The crude drawings showed these beings towering over humans. I took photos and backed away. Then I noticed something on the altar. 3 hiking boots arranged in a triangle. I recognized them from the permit photos. Suddenly, my radio crackled. Immediate extraction. All Rangers, Protocol 7. Rivera's voice came through static, then cut out. I tried to respond. Only more static. Protocol 7 meant extreme danger. Evacuate immediately. Then the weather shifted. The sky dimmed to twilight, clouds rolling in fast. Wind howled through the forest, but inside the clearing everything was still. I knew I had to return to the campsite and begin a formal search, but something told me the hikers had never left this clearing. A twig snapped beyond the tree line. Then another. Something large moved just beyond sight, pacing the edge. Max, Jode, Carrara, I called out. No answer, just the slow cracking of branches moving around me. I drew my service pistol. Useless against a bear or moose, maybe. but I needed some defense. The noise stopped. Silence fell, deeper than before. Even the wind vanished. I stood frozen, heart pounding. Then, 20 yards away, something stepped out of the trees. Upright, massive. I raised my light, but caught only swaying branches. Whatever had been there was gone, if it had ever been real. I scanned the perimeter. Nothing, but the boots were still on my mind. I turned back to examine them and stopped cold. The altar was empty. The boots had vanished. I spun around. Nothing had changed yet. They were gone. "You're tired," I said aloud, just to hear my own voice. "You're imagining things." But the photos on my camera proved I wasn't. The boots had been real. Something had moved them in seconds while my back was turned. Rain began to fall, but not inside the clearing. It was like an invisible wall, kept the storm at bay. I stood dry while the forest around me was drenched. My radio stayed silent. Despite Protocol 7, I couldn't abandon the search. The hikers had clearly been here. I made a decision that still haunts me. I would spend the night in the clearing. The stone shelter offered some cover, and maybe whatever had taken the boots would return. I set up a minimal camp just outside the structure and began a watch schedule. Every 20 minutes, I walked the perimeter with my flashlight. It helped calm my nerves, though exhaustion crept in. On my fourth lap, I saw them. Oversized prints like the ones found near my cabin. They circled the clearing but didn't cross into it. I photographed everything. Each print was 16 inches long, nearly twice my own boot size. 5 toes with an odd gap between the 4th and 5th. The strides suggested a creature at least 8 feet tall. No known animal in North America matched these prints. Even in my zoology courses, supposed Bigfoot evidence usually showed 4 toes. These prints had arches and weight distribution consistent with bipedal movement. Back at my camp, I flipped through the Ranger Handbook. Nothing covered this. The closest protocol was for unidentified large mammals. Keep distance, avoid eye contact, make noise. Sometime past midnight, I must have fallen asleep despite my rotation. I woke suddenly. Everything was silent. The rain had stopped. No wind, no insects, no rustling leaves. Something had changed. The stone structure, once 8 feet tall, now stood nearly 12 feet. Its entrance had grown with it. I blinked, certain I was dreaming. But it remained, larger, real. Then came footsteps from multiple directions. Heavy, deliberate, drawing closer from the forest. I killed my light and moved to the clearing center, trying to stay equidistant from every edge. The sounds stopped at the tree line. Silence returned. "I know you're out there," I said, my voice steady. "I'm Ranger Call. I'm looking for 3 missing hikers. Please, if you've seen them, help me." No reply, but I felt eyes, many of them, watching. "I mean no harm," I continued. "This is your land. I respect that. I just need to find them and go." The silence stretched, then a response. Clicks and low vocal sounds passed from one point of the forest to another. Some kind of communication. A branch cracked to my right. I turned my light. For a moment it caught a figure, massive, 8 feet tall, broad, covered in coarse hair. Not fur, hair. Its eyes reflected my light with an amber glow, not the usual yellow or green of animals. The figure stepped back, vanishing into the shadows. Wait, I shouted. Please. Max, Jode, Carrara. Have you seen them? More clicks. Faster now. Agitated. Then, movement. A large object landed at my feet. Not thrown. Placed. A camera. I recognized it from their gear list. I picked it up. The last photo showed the 3 hikers in front of the structure, taller than I'd first seen it, matching its current size. They smiled nervously. Behind them, in shadow, a tall figure stood in the doorway. The timestamp read 10:17 p.m., 2 nights ago. I looked at the now enlarged entrance. Something had watched them, and now that same thing, or things, watched me. I had 2 choices: retreat to my cabin or enter the structure. Neither felt safe, but only one might reveal what happened. I stepped forward under the towering stone doorway. The light barely penetrated the darkness inside. It was as if the structure absorbed it. My instincts screamed to follow protocol and leave, but the hikers had entered here. This was where their trail ended. Inside, I ducked low, though the entrance was now tall enough to stand. The air was cold, my breath visible, even in the Alaskan summer. The room had changed. What was once a small chamber was now a corridor, sloping downward. The floor was smooth stone, the walls carved with the same figures from the ceiling, some holding humans, others circling an altar. I took photos and pressed on. After 30 steps, I reached a dome-shaped chamber, nearly 50 feet across. Alcoves lined the walls. Dozens of amber eyes, painted or embedded, watched my every move. In the center were 3 stone altars, each holding a single hiking boot, the same ones from before. Behind me, stone scraped on stone. I turned. Where the entrance had been was now a solid slab. No handle, no exit. Panic rose, but I forced it down. Focus, document, find another way. I examined one boot, a women's size 8, Carrara's. A tiny compass was attached to the laces, just as described in the permit. As I reached for it, the floor vibrated slightly. The eyes seemed to blink in unison. From an alcove came a sound. Slow, heavy breathing. I turned. Empty. But dust patterns showed something had recently moved. Then breathing from another alcove. I turned again. Nothing. I know you're here, I said. I'm not leaving without answers. A reply came, not from the alcoves, but above. 3 taps echoed from the ceiling, followed by a low, speech-like rumble. Show yourself, I shouted. What did you do with them? Finally, movement. A large arm retracted behind a distant alcove, covered in hair, not fur, over ash-colored skin. Not animal, not human. Then the clicks returned, and whistles, and the deep vocal tones. Some sort of language passed between unseen figures. I raised my weapon, knowing it would do little. Still, I stepped forward. The alcove opened into another passage, narrower, winding, still sloping downward. The floor bore fresh tracks. Despite everything I'd been taught, turning back wasn't an option. The way out was sealed. I followed the tracks. The air got colder. Roots pushed through the ceiling. We were deep underground. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a smaller room, lit faintly by glowing walls. A kind of living space. Primitive bedding lined one wall. Stone and bone tools sat neatly neatly arranged. Containers of water, preserved foods, some plants I didn't recognize, and trophies, gear from hikers across the decades. Boots, backpacks, snowshoes, watches, some a century old, a ranger's hat from the 1950s. People had been disappearing here for generations, not to accidents or bears, but to this. At the center, on a stone table, lay 3 sets of neatly folded clothes. Max's red flannel, Jod's purple jacket, Carrara's patterned pants. No blood, no struggle, just empty clothes, arranged carefully. Then, the breathing again. Heavy, close. I turned slowly, weapon at the ready. It stood there, blocking the passage I'd come through. At least 8 feet tall, broad and built like a human, just much larger in every way. This wasn't a costume. It wasn't a bear. It was something else entirely. Its face stayed hidden in the shadows, even with the walls glowing around us. But I could see the shape. A strong brow ridge, deep-set eyes that reflected the phosphorescent light back in a warm amber hue, not ape-like as pop culture often imagines such beings, but not quite human either. Something between, something ancient. We locked eyes. Seconds passed, though it felt much longer. It didn't move, and I kept my weapon raised, though my hands shook. Then, unexpectedly, it pointed to the clothing laid out on the stone table, then motioned toward a deeper tunnel I hadn't noticed. It was giving me directions, communicating. Against every instinct for survival, I gave a slow nod to show I understood. The creature stepped aside. It still blocked the exit, but made it clear I was to go deeper. As I neared the new passage, it reached out, fast, gripping my wrist. Not to hurt, just to stop me. Its skin was tough, dry, and a little colder than human skin. It took my service, pistol, examined it briefly, and placed it next to the hiker's clothes on the table. The message was obvious. Continue, but without a weapon. With no real option, I entered the new passage, hearing the heavy footsteps behind me. Whatever came next, I was entirely at the mercy of something science insisted didn't exist, but clearly did. Something that had been watching me since I arrived at Wolf's Lake. Something that had taken 3 hikers. Something now leading me to wherever they had gone. The passage sloped steeply downward, forcing me to brace myself against the walls to stay upright. The glow intensified, now coming from fungus-like growths clinging to the stone. My towering guide kept several paces behind, its breathing steady and constant. We descended for what felt like hundreds of feet, far deeper than seemed possible so close to a lake. Instead of cooling, the air grew warmer, suggesting geothermal activity. That wasn't unheard of in parts of Alaska, but it was unusual here. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber that stole the breath from my lungs. The space stretched beyond what I could see. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. An underground lake filled most of the chamber, its still black surface reflecting the glowing walls like stars on a moonless night. Across the lake, built into the far wall of the cavern, was something astonishing. A settlement. Dozens of cave openings dotted the rock face, some naturally formed, others clearly shaped by hand. Crude walkways and bridges connected them. Lights flickered within. Some looked like fire. Others glowed with the same bioluminescence. Between me and this hidden village was a natural stone bridge that crossed the underground lake. My guide gestured toward it. Forward. No turning back. As we crossed, I spotted movement. Figures emerging from the caves, stepping onto platforms, watching us. I counted at least 20 of them. Large, broad beings like my guide. A community, a tribe. Not quite human, but not anything else we'd recognize either. Near the edge of the shore, 3 familiar figures waited. Not more of the creatures, but humans. The missing hikers. Max, Jod, and Kara. They stood barefoot, unbound, and seemingly unhurt. Their clothes were simple, woven garments, like those I'd seen earlier. They didn't look scared. Instead, their faces held a calmness that immediately set me on edge. It was too calm. Max, Kara, Jode, I called out. Are you okay? I'm Ranger Call. I'm here to get you out. They glanced at each other but didn't respond right away. Finally, Kara stepped forward. We're fine, she said. Her tone was flat. Better than fine. We're where we're supposed to be. My guide moved to join several others near the water line. They spoke in deep rumbles and clicking sounds, sometimes gesturing toward me and the hikers. What happened? I asked, voice low. People have been searching for you. Your families are terrified. Max shook his head slowly. You don't understand yet, but you will. He gestured to the settlement. They've been here for millennia, watching, guarding. Guarding what? I asked, worry mounting. This wasn't fear or trauma. It didn't even feel like Stockholm Syndrome. It was something else. The balance, Jode said. They maintain balance between worlds. They've shown us truths, things that exist beyond what we can perceive. I examined them for any sign of injury or impairment. Their pupils looked normal, no marks on their skin, but their demeanor remained detached, distant. We need to go, I said. I have a radio. We'll call for help. Whatever these beings have done to you, we can fix it. Kara laughed. It was a hollow sound that echoed strangely. They haven't hurt us, she said. They've opened our eyes. Some people are chosen to see, to know, like you, like me. A chill spread through me. Why do you think you got the wolves assignment? Max asked. Why you? They've been watching you too, testing you. The tracks, the sounds, the sudden weather shifts. That wasn't coincidence. A deeper realization began to form. My transfer hadn't been chance. Someone or something had arranged it. One of the creatures approached, taller than the rest, adorned with feathers, bones, and stones, tied into its long hair. A leader, perhaps. It held something in its hand that stopped my breath. My grandfather's necklace. I'd left it in my cabin. Secure. The leader extended the necklace to me, then pointed toward a high cave opening. It was perfectly round and glowed blue, unlike the green light elsewhere. They want to show you, Kara said, what they showed us, what changed everything. And if I say no, I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Then you go back, Max replied. But you'll never fully understand what you saw, or what really exists here. It wasn't a real choice. Duty demanded I return the hikers safely. But curiosity pulled harder. Curiosity that had drawn me to Alaska, to solitude, a need to know what lies beyond what we call reality. I'll go, I said carefully, but we all leave together afterward. All 4 They exchanged another look, that same strange calm still on their faces. "If that's what you still want after," Jod said, "they won't stop you. No one is forced to stay. It's the understanding that holds us here." The leader gestured toward the glowing cave and held out its hand. Not a threat, but an invitation. I accepted. We climbed using rough, sturdy ladders and crossed narrow bridges high above the black water. The fear had faded, replaced by focused, surreal curiosity. The circular opening emitted not only light, but a low, rhythmic vibration, more felt than heard. Inside, the tunnel quickly opened into a small spherical chamber. At the center hovered a blue orb. It wasn't fire or fungus. It floated unsupported, somehow suspended between dimensions. It pulsed and shifted, made of particles that danced in complex, mesmerizing patterns. The leader gestured for me to step forward alone. The hikers waited behind, their faces bathed in blue glow. "What is it?" I asked, not really expecting a clear answer. "The threshold," Kara said from behind me, "between what we think is real and what actually is." I stepped closer. The light swirled, not solid but active, living. The leader made a sign. Palms open toward the orb, fingers spread. "Touch it," Max said. "Both hands. Then you'll understand." Everything logical in me screamed to stop, but my hands lifted anyway. The light shimmered on my skin, turning it foreign. I hovered inches away. "Why me?" I asked. "Why any of us?" "Some people can see beyond the surface," Jod said. "They've been watching humanity for generations, looking for those who can understand. Your grandfather knew. That's why he gave you that name, Call. It means lightning, the bridge between sky and earth." My hands touched the orb. Reality shattered. What I experienced can't be described easily. Layers of dimensions folded over each other. Beings lived in the spaces between atoms. Time spiraled rather than flowed. These creatures, the guardians, stood watch over the seams between realities. Their purpose, protect those boundaries, prevent contact that would unravel human minds. I saw it all, understood why some people were taken, not as victims, but as those who could help. When awareness returned, I was on my knees. The leader's hand steadied me. The hikers looked at me with recognition. I had seen what they'd seen. "Now you understand," Kara said, and I did. The truth, terrifying, awe-inspiring, about what exists just beyond perception. Why certain people are drawn to wilderness. Why solitude sometimes feels like communion. "We have to decide," I said, standing. "All of us," the leader nodded, pointing toward the way back. The choice was real. Return to the world above with this knowledge, or stay and join their purpose. Max, Jod, and Kara had chosen to remain. I could see that clearly. The world would keep searching, but their disappearance would be just one more mystery lost in the wild. My decision was harder. I still had obligations. But now, I knew too much. The answer wasn't verbal. It was internal. I would return, but not the same. I would be a bridge, a guardian in my own way. "I'll tell them I never found you," I said. "That the trail went cold." They nodded, grateful. "But I'll come back," I added, turning to the leader. "There's more I need to learn." The creature made a gesture I now understood. A promise. They'd be waiting, The hike back to the surface was silent. My watch said I'd been gone 6 hours. It felt both shorter and far, far longer. The stone structure had shrunk again, its entrance low and narrow. The weather had cleared, the storm gone, as if it had never been. My pack was intact, my pistol returned. I began the long hike back. As I stepped beyond the clearing, my radio came alive. "Call, come in." Rivera's voice crackled with urgency. "I'm here," I replied calmly. "Lost signal in the storm." "Thank God," she said. "Protocol 7 is lifted." The storm dissipated suddenly. "Any sign of the hikers?" I paused, looking back. "No," I said. "No sign. Trail went cold." The search continued for weeks. Aircraft, dogs, rangers. They found nothing. They weren't meant to. When I reached my cabin, I saw fresh prints in the mud. 16 inches long. Not monsters, guardians, watching, reminding me of the truth. I filed the reports, finished my assignment. On paper, nothing changed. Inside, everything had. I still hear them sometimes at night, the clicks, the low rumbles. Not threats, messages. I'm still a ranger. But I serve both worlds now. What's seen and what isn't. And when visitors come to this land, I watch. Some of them will feel the same call I did. A few will find that clearing, and when they do, I'll be watching, just as someone once watched me. I watched the small plane vanish beyond the tree line, brushing off the pilot's warning as the usual initiation ritual for new rangers. The cabin was more spacious than expected. A main room with a wood stove, a compact kitchen, a desk outfitted with radio gear, and a separate bedroom featuring a surprisingly comfortable cot. The ranger before me had left detailed notes on upkeep, local weather trends, and trail patrols, but nothing about any dangers beyond typical wilderness concerns. My responsibilities were simple: monitor the weather station, log wildlife activity, maintain emergency shelters, and assist any hikers unwise enough to venture into the backcountry in winter. The nearest town was 85 miles away. The closest ranger station, 37 miles by snowmobile. The first week passed in quiet solitude as I settled into a daily rhythm. Wake at dawn, radio check-in, maintain equipment, patrol a portion of the trail system, return before dark, evening radio check-in, dinner, and reading by the fire. Slowly, the constant anxiety I'd brought from the city began to ease. Then came the first heavy snowfall. 3 feet overnight transformed the area into a strange, silent white world. That morning, I saw tracks circling the cabin, too large for a wolf and moving with a gait that didn't match a bear. They vanished into the northern forest. That night, I heard it. A sound, not quite a howl, not quite a scream. Something in between. It echoed across the frozen lake, bouncing off peaks until it felt like it came from everywhere. The radio crackled during my check-in. "Echo Lake, this is base. You reported strange tracks. Over." "Affirmative, base. Possibly bear, but unusual pattern. Also heard unidentified vocalization at approximately 2300 hours." "Over." A long pause. "Copy that, Echo Lake. Keep monitoring, but avoid investigating the North Ridge alone. Repeat, do not approach North Ridge. Storm system coming in. Stay put. Over. Copy. Any reason for the North Ridge restriction? Over." Another pause. Local lore. Nothing to be concerned about. It's a traditional hunting area. Respect the boundaries. Base out. I shut off the radio, uneasy. Outside, the wind picked up, blowing snow against the windows, like fingernails across glass. The wood stove hissed as I added another log, shadows flickering on the walls. In the corner, a bookshelf held field guides, manuals, and worn paperbacks left by previous rangers. One slim, hand-bound book caught my eye, a collection of local folklore. I flipped to a dog-eared page titled The Watcher in the Woods. It described a creature that stalked these mountains, taller than a man, feet like a bear, walking upright. As I read, the wind outside seemed to whisper. When I closed the book, the darkness beyond the windows felt aware. That night, I dreamt of something chasing me through endless trees. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, right behind me, breathing down my neck. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, despite the cabin's cold. The fire had died down, and in the silence, I heard slow, deliberate steps on the porch. 3 heavy footfalls. A pause. The soft sound of something shifting against the wall. I stayed still, barely breathing. Then, a deep hum vibrated through the cabin. Not quite a growl, not quite speech. A sudden, powerful strike hit the door, rattling the thick wooden bar holding it shut. When dawn came, the door was untouched. No tracks marred the fresh of snow. I told myself it had been a dream, just stress and that ridiculous book. But I knew, deep down, the real nightmare was just beginning. The storm raged for 3 days. Whiteout conditions kept me inside. I only stepped out briefly to check instruments and gather wood. Radio contact with base grew spotty. Static overpowered most transmissions. Occasionally, I caught fragments. Reports from Eastern Sector. Similar events. Exercise caution. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. The world outside was buried under 6 feet of snow. The sun finally shone, but the light was so intense I had to wear goggles. That's when I noticed something was wrong. There were no animal sounds, no birds, no small movements beneath the snow. The forest was silent, like a tomb. Then I saw it. At the edge of the clearing, several trees had broken branches, high up, 9 feet or more. They weren't snapped randomly. They formed a semicircle around the cabin, a boundary. I approached carefully. Snow crunched beneath my boots. Caught in the splintered wood were coarse, dark strands of hair, far too thick for bear, too long for moose, too dark for any known animal in the region. It resembled human hair, but thicker, and it carried a musky, unfamiliar scent. Back inside, I studied the samples under the microscope. The hairs had hollow cores and a strange cellular structure, unlike anything in the station's reference materials. I logged everything, then tried the radio. Base, this is Echo Lake. Over. Only static. Base, radio check. Over. More static. Then a broken transmission. Can't. Signal. North Ridge. Don't. Silence. Outside, the weather was changing again. Dark clouds rolled in. Protocol required a check on nearby emergency shelters after major storms. The nearest one was 3 miles east, usually an easy trek. I was hesitant, but duty called. I geared up, took the shotgun. and left a note in the station log. The forest felt different now, not calm, watchful, oppressive. Half a mile from the cabin, I found a massive footprint, 18 inches long, 5 toes. It had thawed and refrozen, but the impression was clear. The stride between prints was 4 feet, bipedal. I took photos, placing my boot next to it for scale. As I moved toward the shelter, the tracks reappeared off and on, sometimes parallel to my route, sometimes drawing closer. It felt like I was being guided. The shelter came into view just before noon. Relief turned to dread. The door hung from 1 inch. Claw marks gouged the wood. Inside, everything was destroyed. Food crates smashed, cans crushed and twisted. The emergency radio was shattered. Pine branches had been arranged in a bizarre pattern on the floor, one that hurt to look at. The same musky smell from the hair samples was here, stronger, mixed with a bitter metallic scent. As I documented the scene, a sound echoed from the woods, rhythmic tapping. 3 quick, 3 slow, repeat. It circled the clearing. I grabbed my gear and left. Outside, daylight dimmed as storm clouds returned. Then came breaking branches from the direction I needed to go. I chose a longer return route, sticking to open meadows. Every so often, I'd stop to listen. Twice, I saw tall, dark shapes among the trees. They didn't move when I looked directly at them, but seemed to shift when I looked away. A mile from the cabin, exhausted, I heard my name spoken in my exact radio voice. "This is Coda Rivers, Echo Lake Station." It came from the trees. I ran. Something huge crashed through the forest behind me. I didn't look back. Smoke from the chimney guided me. I sprinted into the clearing, burst through the cabin door, and slammed the bar into place. A deep, mournful sound came from the tree line. Not anger. Something closer to disappointment. That night I played back the recorder I'd left, running during my hike. It mostly captured my breathing and the crunch of snow, but under that, faint whispers, too soft to understand. And beneath those, something deeper, rhythmic, structured, like speech. Then the radio came alive. "Echo Lake, this is search and rescue. We have a situation. Hiker missing near your sector. Last known position 6 miles northwest of your station. Experienced backcountry. Missed 3 check-ins. Weather window opens tomorrow. Can you assist? Over. 6 miles northwest, North Ridge. Search and rescue. This is Echo Lake. I can assist. But there's something you should know about that area. Over. Echo Lake. Interference. Repeat. Last transmission. Over. I paused. I'll begin the search at dawn. Echo Lake out. That night, I dug through the station's archive box. At the bottom, beneath old reports, was a thin folder labeled Incidents, North Ridge, Classified. Inside, decades of reports, missing hikers, damaged equipment, strange sounds, enormous tracks, photos of dark figures at the edge of forests, disturbing branch arrangements, identical to what I saw at the shelter. A final memo dated 3 years ago. Personnel advised to follow standard protocol for North Ridge events. Respect traditional boundaries. Document encounters. Do not inform the public. Send all evidence to regional HQ. I finally understood why the previous ranger left early. Why base avoided direct answers. tomorrow I would search for a missing man in land that wasn't ours. As if in response, something heavy moved across the roof. Snow slid off, blocking the windows. 3 deliberate steps. Then, silence. I checked the shotgun, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Dawn came under clear skies. A brief calm before another storm. I had 6 hours, maybe less. I radioed base, vague, about my destination. Echo Lake, proceed with caution. Backup delayed. You're on your own for 24 hours. Maintain hourly contact. Over. I packed gear, medical supplies, extra ammunition, and the flashlight. At the last moment, I added the incident folder to my pack. If I saw what the others had seen, I needed to be ready. Morning light cut through the trees as I headed for the hikers' last known location. Snow had erased all tracks, but broken branches and disturbed brush revealed something large had passed through. 3 miles out, I entered a ravine that climbed toward North Ridge. It grew colder. The light dimmed. The trees were older here, their trunks covered in moss. I'd never seen, documented. Radio check. Base, this is Echo Lake, 3 miles northwest. Continuing search. No contact yet. Weather holding. Over. Only static. I tried twice more, then logged the silence. Halfway up the ravine, I found a broken trekking pole. Carbon shaft snapped. Not a fall. Something broke it. Nearby, a torn piece of safety orange fabric hung from a branch 8 feet up. I photographed both, then followed signs of something being dragged uphill. Occasional boot prints, size 11, visible where wind had cleared the rocks. The trail ended at a plateau. There, the forest changed. Trees bent inward to form a rough shelter. Smaller saplings woven into walls. The snow had been cleared, revealing dark soil and that same strange moss. At the center, a backpack, high-end gear torn open. Inside, a wallet. ID confirmed it belonged to Jordan Walsh, 36, Fairbanks, and a journal. Final entry, dated 2 days ago. Day 4, something's been following me. Thought it was a bear, but it's wrong. Keeps 100 yards behind. Never closer, never farther. Makes sounds, almost like talking. Found weird structures. Heading for ranger station tomorrow. If it doesn't come, closer. Beyond the bag, more gear. Drag marks led toward a cave hidden in rock and moss. I stood frozen. Protocol demanded. I reported the situation and waited for backup. But the radio remained silent. The storm drew closer. And if Walsh was still alive, every minute counted. I activated my emergency locator beacon, a last resort device that transmits coordinates to search and rescue, and advanced toward the cave entrance. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow passage descending steeply. The walls, slick with moisture and covered in that peculiar moss, seemed to pulse faintly in the beam. The air wafting up was thick with a musky odor, stronger now and laced with the same metallic tang I'd noticed near the damaged shelter. About 20 feet in, the passage opened into a wider chamber. My light reflected off numerous surfaces hanging from the ceiling, metal and glass, camera parts, watches, belt buckles, eyeglasses. Decades worth of personal items, suspended like a grotesque wind chime. They clinked gently in the breeze, creating an unsettling melody. Beneath them, lay heaps of torn clothing, boots, and backpacks, soft materials methodically separated from the hard. And beyond that, more tunnels extended into the blackness. From one of those darkened corridors came a sound, weak, raspy, coughing. "Walsh," I called, keeping my voice low. "Jordan Walsh, National Park Service. I'm here to help." The coughing ceased, replaced by a hoarse whisper. "Oh God, you need to go. It collects things. People. It keeps." His voice was cut off by a shuffle, then silence. I moved forward cautiously, shotgun ready, heading down the tunnel where I'd heard Walsh. The air grew warmer. The moss now glowed with a faint bioluminescence, casting everything in a sickly green hue. The corridor led to another chamber, larger than the first. My light caught movement. A figure pressed against the far wall. Walsh, alive but clearly terrified. His face was sunken, clothes torn, one arm twisted unnaturally. He saw me and his eyes widened, not in relief, but alarm. He silently mouthed, "Behind you." Something shifted to my left, a massive form that had remained utterly still until now. I swung the beam toward it. First came a patch of dense dark hair. Then I tilted the light up and up until I saw what passed for a face not human. Instead, ridges and hollows formed a structure with unsettling echoes of humanity. Its deep, reflective eyes caught the light and twisted it back at me. It was at least 9 feet tall, its shoulders brushing the chamber walls. Time froze. Then it made a sound, rhythmic, patterned, the same sequence I'd heard in the woods, but now it was unmistakably a language. The vibrations seemed to resonate through my chest, changing something fundamental in how I perceived the world. Walsh suddenly lunged toward me. The creature reacted instantly, swatting him aside with terrifying speed. I fired my shotgun without thinking. The deafening blast echoed in the tight space. The creature roared, a sound so powerful it shook dust and small stones from the ceiling. I grabbed Walsh's good arm and pulled him with me. The creature followed, slower, more deliberate, but clearly enraged rather than hurt. We raced back through the tunnels, Walsh staggering beside me. The creature stayed close, its steps measured and inevitable. It knew this terrain. We didn't. Somehow, we made it to the main tunnel and emerged into the snowy twilight. The storm had arrived early, snow falling thick and fast. Walsh collapsed at the cave mouth, spent. "Can't outrun it," he gasped. "Been playing with me, letting me go, catching me again, studying me." I pulled him up. "We're not staying to find out why." Half carrying him, I left most of our gear behind. I kept only essentials, the shotgun, emergency supplies, and the folder of incident reports. We scrambled down the ravine, following my footprints before the snow buried them. Behind us, the creature emerged, tall, dark, silhouetted against the stormy sky. It didn't chase. Instead, it lifted its head, sniffing the air. I felt dread in my bones. It was memorizing our scent. Then it let out a long, echoing call, and the response came. 3 distinct howls from different directions. There were more of them. They were coordinating. Night fell, and the storm turned savage. Visibility dropped to nothing. Still, the creature followed at a steady distance, occasionally visible through the trees. Twice we heard other massive bodies moving in the forest ahead, forcing us off our path. They weren't chasing, they were herding us, not toward safety, but somewhere else. The snowstorm worsened. My compass spun wildly, affected by something in the rocks. GPS was useless. Walsh deteriorated fast, cold, hungry, injured. "We need shelter," I shouted. He nodded, too weak to speak. I remembered a small cave system about a mile east. Not ideal, considering the circumstances, but our only chance. We turned off course, trudging through waist-high drifts. The creatures kept their distance, but stayed with us, silhouettes moving effortlessly through the blizzard. The cave appeared like a miracle. I got Walsh inside, then gathered branches to block the entrance. The interior was shallow, no tunnels, no branches. A key difference from their lair. I laid out emergency blankets and warmed Walsh with a chemical heat pack. "Why haven't they attacked?" he asked through chattering teeth. "They could have taken us a dozen times." I showed him the folder. "They're studying us. They have been, for years. Not all who disappear are killed. Some are observed." Walsh stared at the photos. "Not Bigfoot," he muttered. "Something older. Tlingit called them Kushtaka, land otter men. Others called them shapeshifters." "Not supernatural," I replied, recalling the face I'd seen. "Just not human." Outside, they circled, staying just out of sight. 3 of them, communicating in those complex, resonating sounds that vibrated through the stone. I checked the shotgun. 2 shells left. It had hurt 1, but not much. They were testing us, gauging our reactions. Walsh drifted off into a restless sleep, stayed on watch. The cold was relentless, creeping through every layer of clothing. The wind shifted, snow blowing directly into the cave. Our makeshift barrier began to collapse. I was adjusting branches when the silence hit me. The wind stopped. Complete stillness. I peered outside. The sky had cleared. Stars burned bright overhead, aurora streaking green and purple. The snow sparkled and visibility stretched for hundreds of yards. And the creatures were gone. No movement, no shadows, only huge tracks circling our shelter and then leading away in 3 directions. I followed one with my eyes, tracing it toward a distant ridge. There, a strange light glowed, too steady for aurora, too strong for a fire. "What do you see?" Walsh had awakened, unsteady on his feet. "I don't know," I replied. "But the storm's over. We need to move." We gathered what little we had and set out. I chose a route that kept us far from that ridge light. The snow was deep, some drifts up to my waist. Walsh's injury was worsening. An hour in, we crested a hill. The cabin, a dark square in the snow. No smoke, no lights. Then Walsh grabbed my arm. A figure stood by the cabin, human-sized, dressed in cold weather park gear, facing away. "Hello," I called, hope rising. The figure turned. It wore park ranger gear, my gear, and my face. Perfect except for the eyes. They reflected the aurora like black mirrors. "This is Coda Rivers, Echo Lake Station," it said, in my exact voice. Walsh's grip tightened. "They don't just mimic sound," he whispered. "They can become us." The thing tilted its head, studying us. Then it began to change. Its features melted, reshaped. A new face emerged, thin, glasses, hollow eyes. A ranger from a photo in one of the reports. One who'd gone missing 3 years ago. Subject shows fear response to familiar stimuli, it said, in a monotone I recognized from old voice. Logs, recommendation, continue observation protocol. The cabin door creaked open. Light spilled out, harsh and artificial. More figures emerged, some in ranger uniforms, others in old hiking gear. All had the same unnatural gait. All had those black, empty eyes. They're getting better, Walsh murmured. Better at luring people. The first creature, the one wearing my face, stepped forward. This is Coda Rivers, it repeated, then added, come inside. Safe, now. Storm coming back. It gestured toward the cabin. Its arm was too long. Fingers jointed wrong. Run, I whispered, reaching for the shotgun. Before I could fire, that deep vibration filled the air. Their language. They dropped the human act, their bodies stretched, clothing tearing. I fired both shells, creating a moment of chaos. Then grabbed Walsh and ran. We plunged into the forest, deep snow slowing us, but slowing them more. Behind us, their real voices echoed. Not speech, but clicks and rumbles. Coordination. Communication. We ran until we collapsed, behind a fallen tree. No idea where we were. The cabin was gone. They had it now, and everything in it. Walsh slumped against the log. What are they? He whispered. I had no answer. Not aliens, not legends. Just something that had evolved beside us in secret. Watching, learning, adapting. We have to reach the forestry road, I said. 15 miles east. Travel at night. Hide during day. A snap of a branch cut me off. Heavy. Close. They found us. I can't go on, Walsh said. You go. Tell them. I'm not leaving you. A pattern of knocks echoed. 3 hits, pause, then repeated. Surrounding us. Walsh pulled out a recorder. I documented everything, he said. Take it. Make them listen. I took it and secured it inside my jacket. Then the first creature stepped from the trees. 9 feet of raw presence backlit by the stars. Others joined it, closing in. The aurora flared above us. In that moment, I saw them clearly. Not beasts, not myths. Something ancient, something intelligent. They had evolved here. Not above us, not beneath, but alongside. Apex predators of the wilderness. Observers, the largest one stepped closer and spoke. Not a mimic, real language. A message. Some ancient part of me understood. You do not belong here. Dawn broke, searing the snow with golden light. I was moving, being carried. Tree branches passed overhead. Pain throbbed in my limbs. Wounds from claws. Memories rushed back. Walsh's sacrifice. The burning branch. The chaos. I was being dragged in a makeshift stretcher. By whom? I turned my head. A human figure trudged ahead, breaking trail. Regulation hat. Real eyes. He's awake. The ranger called back. Coda, can you hear me? You're safe now. Search and rescue. We've got you. Relief surged through me, then quickly turned to dread. Walsh. Jordan Walsh. The ranger's expression said it all. I'm sorry. We only found you. There was a lot of blood in the snow. Multiple blood types. Signs of a major struggle. I tried to sit up despite the pain. We have to go. Back. The creatures. They're intelligent. They've been taking people for years, studying us. The ranger exchanged a quick look with the colleague helping carry my stretcher. You're suffering from hypothermia and blood loss, he said gently. Hallucinations are common. They weren't hallucinations. I reached into my pocket, but it was empty. The recorder was gone. There was proof. Walsh had audio. The station's files. They go back decades. The creatures have taken over the cabin. They can imitate us, our voices, even our faces. The cabin was empty when we arrived, said the second ranger softly. No signs of violence or occupation, just opened gear cases and scattered supplies. The files, I pressed. They document incidents on the North Ridge. We'll check, promised the first ranger, clearly trying to soothe me. But first, you need medical care. The extraction team is waiting, 2 miles out with a helicopter. Exhausted, I sank back onto the stretcher, knowing how unbelievable I sounded. Talking about shapeshifters, hidden species, and ancient intelligences. But I knew what I'd seen, what Walsh had witnessed, what others before us had encountered in those mountains. At Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, doctors treated me for hypothermia, blood loss, and deep lacerations consistent with a large animal attack. The official report blamed a probable bear encounter for Walsh's disappearance and my injuries. Search crews spent 3 days looking for him. They found nothing before another storm forced them to stop. 2 weeks later, cleared for debriefing, I sat across from the district ranger and 2 officials from the Department of the Interior. They listened carefully, their expressions neutral. When I finished, the district ranger pushed a folder toward me. It wasn't the incident logs from the cabin. It was a psychiatric evaluation. Post-traumatic stress, he said gently. Extreme environmental exposure. Your mind constructed a story to explain the trauma. Bears don't gather human items in caves, I said. They don't copy voices or hunt in coordinated patterns. One of the officials leaned in. We've monitored Echo Lake for decades. Yes, there have been odd incidents, things we couldn't explain, but nothing proving the existence of an unknown species, let alone one with intelligence. The files you found, routine logs. Some rangers embellished their reports after long winters alone. The woman's tone was kind but firm. We've all heard sounds in the woods that seem human, seen shapes that look like something walking. Upright. I stared at them, the truth becoming clear. They already knew, but admitting it would mean facing unanswerable questions. Taking steps they weren't prepared for. Better to downplay it, rationalize it, seal it away. What happens now? I asked. Medical leave, the district ranger said. Then reassignment. A front country station this time. No more remote duty. And the Echo Lake outpost? I asked. A glance passed between the officials. Decommissioned. The area will be protected as a natural preserve, closed to the public indefinitely, for wildlife conservation. Unspoken lines had been drawn, a quiet agreement made. I nodded, understanding the expectations. Accept the official explanation, take the transfer, never speak of what happened. But as I left, the weight of Walsh's missing recorder stayed with me. I had lost it in the chaos. But maybe the creatures hadn't. Maybe they had kept it. Another artifact to analyze. Another piece of us to understand. 6 months later, assigned to a visitor center near Denali, I received an unmarked package. Inside was a USB drive and a short note in unfamiliar handwriting. Found in archives while digitizing old files. Thought you should have a copy. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Some boundaries should remain uncrossed. The drive held documents dating back to 1937. Records erased from the official system. Photos, journal entries, testimony, proof that an intelligence has shared our world, hidden from it deliberately. I still have that drive, encrypted, hidden, and I still wake from dreams of those eyes, too aware to be animal, too old to be human. I still hear the rhythm of their speech in winter storms, sometimes on clear nights when the aurora lights the sky. I stand outside and look north, toward the mountains, and I think about what's still out there, beings that watched our rise, that may remain long after we're gone, beings that observe us as a curious, perhaps dangerous anomaly. I wonder what they've concluded, what they think of us, what they plan to do next. But more than anything, I wonder if we'll recognize the truth when they decide we're no longer worth studying, or if, like my superiors, we'll keep choosing comforting lies over unsettling truths. Because the scariest thing I learned out there wasn't that monsters exist. It's that they've been here all along, watching, learning, and we've been their experiment from the very beginning.